Verstappen's ongoing dominance seems like it will not be ending anytime soon. However, with the budget cap penalty slowly but surely creeping up, things might change sooner rather than later. This was echoed by Christian Horner, who stated some bad news for the Red Bull fans. Could a change be on the horizon for Formula One, and is the Red Bull dominance coming to an end, with the Austrian team themselves being the main culprit for such a thing? You don't need to be a Formula One expert or even watch the sport in general to see that Red Bull has started the 2023 season on a high, and this is an understatement. However, what is noticeable is that many fans are losing interest in the sport due to their overwhelming dominance, having clinched victories in all of the first 7 races of this season. I think it's important to remember that this dominance was anticipated well ahead of the season, since everyone was well aware that the RB19 would be a force to reckon with on the grid, and the regulatory changes did not significantly empower any other team to match the high bar Red Bull has set. Where I see the true battle is in the latter half of the season, or it might even start before the summer break. This is primarily due to the budget cap penalty that will be imposed on Red Bull. They'll have 10% less time in aerodynamic facilities and CFD factories. Furthermore, they'll have to endure an additional 5% cut due to their Constructors' Championship victory, which Horner has aptly termed as suffering from their own success. Horner may be correct or not, but I think these penalties will result in a significant deceleration in Red Bull's development rate. Considering Mercedes' massive upgrade introduced in Monaco and its further exploitation in Barcelona, Red Bull's leadership is potentially at risk. Of course, there's a chance that Verstappen could be so far ahead that further development may be unnecessary, but this issue has been denied by both Marko and Horner. Horner in particular has stressed the substantial impact the budget cap penalty will have on the team. It's evident how Horner has often complained about the difficulties Red Bull faces due to being the only team penalized for breaching the budget cap. Honestly, besides the administrative breach by Aston Martin, they are the only ones guilty of this alleged crime, making any of his arguments on the issue irrelevant. In the F1 world, many believe the penalty was merely a slap on the wrist, considering the early dominance of Verstappen and Perez in 2023. However, I suspect the balance of power will shift as the season progresses, something that Horner also extremely fears. He has expressed concern about the significant impact the budget cap penalty will have on their trajectory for the rest of the season. To compound this, the Austrian team is also dealing with the loss of their top engineer, Rob Marshall, who decided to bring his expertise to McLaren. The budget cap is a normal hurdle that every team must face. Yet for Red Bull, which paid a $7 million fine to the FIA for their breach, managing finances in such a fiscally tight era becomes particularly challenging. Additionally, when you're part of the most successful team on the grid, it's only natural to seek higher compensation for your services. This is undoubtedly the case with lead engineers Pierre Vacher and Adrian Newey. If you're an engineer at Red Bull, even if your role isn't as prominent as that of Vacher or Newey, the mere fact that you've contributed to the best car on the grid carries considerable weight. Other teams are willing to shell out hefty sums to poach staff from Red Bull, a strategy that's evidenced by Dan Fallow's move to Aston Martin, where he's been instrumental in their recent resurgence. With Rob Marshall's departure for McLaren, I wouldn't be surprised if the Woking-based team follows a similar trajectory. It seems Red Bull is bleeding talent, with notable personnel departing and rumors about Newey potentially stepping away from F1. This trend could soon shift the magic and momentum of the 2023 season to another constructor. The budget cap constraints, in my view, are likely Horner's greatest concern. When asked about whether this sacred rule of the sport complicates Red Bull's efforts to retain high-quality staff, this is what Red Bull's team principal said. Of course it does. You can't carry anybody within the team, and I think that everybody has to warrant their place within the camp. Rob was focused on other projects in recent years, and the offer that McLaren made is probably half their cap, so you can't blame him for wanting to go and do that. So there we have it. Clearly, Red Bull's team members are aware of their value, which is why they're so highly sought after by competitors. The budget cap applies to all, potentially posing challenges for McLaren too, as they've invested heavily in a single car. But let's not forget, these individuals often have their own faithful engineers ready to follow them anywhere, as seen with Fallow's move. Horner addressed the issue of frequent personnel departures, a key concern at Red Bull. Regardless of one's talent, it's nearly impossible to surpass the leadership of Vacher and Newey. These are two basic pillars that are so important in Red Bull's engineering department. Even if one is the next Newey or Vacher, the team won't risk destabilizing its established hierarchy, forcing those with ambition to seek opportunities elsewhere. This gamble can pay off, as it did for Fallows at Aston Martin, but it can also backfire. Horner suggests that this movement of technical staff among teams could lead to a so-called wage-price spiral. He further elaborated on this issue, stating, "You have to make sure it's not a race to the bottom. The problem is that you have long-standing personnel that have contributed a significant amount that you don't want to see forced out of their roles because of the cap. Just because you can justify 10 youngsters versus an experienced person, and that's the constant bait you have. We've had redundancies through the cap. Jane Poole, former COO, now working as a special advisor for Mercedes, was one of those as well. She was a redundancy that we made because we couldn't justify the role within the cap." Evidently, the team holding all the aces in this era, like Red Bull in 2022, is likely to feel the budget cap's impact most acutely. But it doesn't release them from responsibility. If all other teams manage to stay within the cap, so could the Austrian outfit. The real impact of their penalty remains to be seen, as it hasn't yet manifested in RB19's development. With Mercedes now closing the gap to Red Bull by a few tenths of a second, it's clear they have a solid foundation to further refine the W14 and increase its competitiveness. They're not alone in this pursuit, as Aston Martin plans to roll out its first upgrade package for the AMR23 in Montreal. Whitmarsh, the CEO of Aston Martin, hints that the car's floor will be the main improvement to the green Red Bull. Then we also have Ferrari, who, even though they're struggling, are still the team that is closest in competition compared to Red Bull at the end of the day, and you cannot rule them out of a potential fight for the highest place on the podium. Leclerc and Sainz are motivated and trust the team in the Maranello factory. Horner insists that Red Bull is unfazed by rivals examining and photographing their car's floor. However, Mercedes' stated intention to study the design closely has surely raised eyebrows among the 2022 Constructors' Champions. So, as the leading team, disturbances are to be expected, and with Hamilton lobbying the FIA to tweak the rules to enhance competition, it's clear that solutions to Red Bull's dominance are thin on the ground. But this has been the situation only up until now, as other teams are preparing upgrades that have Red Bull on edge. Given this, the season promises to be very interesting, especially as Mercedes starts to reap the rewards of their latest design modifications. The impressive performance leap by Aston Martin further underlines that even though Red Bull is currently far ahead, an end to their reign could be imminent, whether it comes from internal challenges or the external advances of their rivals. All in all, we might yet see an interesting season up ahead, if not for the Drivers' Championship, then certainly for the Constructors' one. Red Bull must not take anything lightly from now until the end of the season, as their honeymoon period is over, with Mercedes posing a serious threat now and with their own issues in both the budget cap and CFD penalties. Will they handle it, or will they crack under pressure? Only time will tell. What are your thoughts about the future of Red Bull? Will we see a team bring them down from the top in the next year or two, or will they cement their spot as the team to beat? Let us know your thoughts and opinions in the comments below.